Hey writers. Writers, I'm not sure if you know this, but I started a garden. Now, it's not a big garden because this is a new thing for me, but I'm gathering all of the supplies that I'm going to need to make my garden great. And I've got a ton of supplies too. But now I have to figure out how I'm going to sort all of my supplies. Since I want to be a great gardener, I know that I have to stay organized. So I've been thinking about all of my supplies and the possible categories for them. For instance, I've got a pair of gloves. I'm thinking, should my gloves go in a bin labeled stuff to wear? Or should I put my gloves with a shovel in a bin labeled tools for planting? Are you realizing what I'm realizing? That some stuff can't just get sorted into one category, that it could be sorted into a few different categories, a few different ways. So getting your stuff organized into boxes of things is going to be a bit more complicated than we might think. It's kind of the same when we're writing a speech as we're planting a garden, right? It helps to take some time before we start to organize what we have and make sure we bring our best selves, our most organized self to our work. So today what I want to teach you is that writers of persuasive speeches organize their evidence. And one way to do this is to figure out several possible ways to group or make categories for your evidence. And then you can decide which one of those ways works best. Then once your evidence is grouped in a way that makes sense, it'll be easier for you to determine your next steps for your evidence, where you have a lot of evidence and where you still need to gather some more. Let's start by looking at the page from my notebook that I wrote. I typed it out so that it would be easier for us to work with today. This page contains a bunch of evidence all stuffed together. I'm hoping that I'll be able to look over the evidence and think about ways I can group this into categories. Maybe I can highlight some parts that are about one subtopic and underline the parts that are about another subtopic. Or maybe I can find another way to chunk this information. Okay, so writers, I'm going to do this challenging work today. I'm going to categorize the evidence that I've gathered about my claim and that we need to make diverse classroom libraries. Will you think about it with me? Will you think about some ways that I could possibly chunk this information into categories? Okay, so it looks like some of the evidence is about kids in our classroom. Like the part where we say kids need to see characters that look like them, that feels like it's about kids in our classroom. And then it feels like some of the other evidence is about kids around the world, like the part where it says kids need to see characters that don't just look one way. So maybe I could have one category be titled windows, and that could be about the kids that, the kids in the world, the kids around the world. And then another category could be titled mirrors, and that could be about the kids in our classroom, like us. So let me try categorizing my work in that way. Look, I've done it. Look down here. Do you see what I've done here, writers? Do you see how I've organized my information into two categories, into windows and mirrors? And I found ways that my evidence is similar, and I put them into different categories. And writers, you should be noticing that we're looking all over our evidence that we've gathered and deciding different ways to group these pieces of evidence together. This way, we can figure out what we have and what we still need to gather. Writers, there will be a lot of times where you'll want to write persuasively. Perhaps you'll be writing speeches like we're doing now, or perhaps you'll be writing persuasive letters or petitions. In any case, you're going to want to approach this page with armloads of information. Just like now, we have a ton of information on diverse libraries, and you've got a ton of information on your topics. But you can't just bring an armload of information, of evidence, set in a giant mountain in front of you. You got to start grabbing one piece of evidence and then another and then writing that up. And instead, we want to always remember that an important thing to do before drafting is to think, how can I sort all of my evidence and all that I want to say? It's easy to think in your mind about one way that it could possibly go, one way you could sort the information, and then another way, and then you can think about another way that you could sort the information, and you want to choose the one that makes the most sense for you and your audience. And that organization makes it much easier and more likely that your first draft will be closer to what you really want it to look like, what you really want it to say. Okay, writers, I can tell you've got a lot to do today with all of that information that you have about your topic. I think you're ready to go off and do the best writing that you've ever done. Off you go.